Driving in the wet. It's something we all kind of disregard in terms of our practice and pray that it doesn't rain in our races or qualifying sessions. But sooner or later that rain will come, whether you are ready or not. And it will take more than just changing your tyres to be quick in wet weather. But here at Veloce we have come up with 5 top tips to help you become a master in the rain. Step 1. Which boots are best? When it comes to switching between any compounds of tyres, dry or wet, your race engineer is very useful as he will tell you when it's time to switch to wet weather tyres or back to the dry ones.
We should see heavy rainfall on track in about 10 minutes. Dries seem like the fastest tyre at the moment.
But can you switch earlier to get a jump on the rest of the field? It's certainly risky, but if executed well, you can gain lots of time on your rivals. If you are unsure though, it's best to wait until the race engineer gives you the all clear to do the switch. DRS is also a very good indicator as to when it's time to switch tyres. If DRS is disabled, then it's probably time to start thinking about intermediate tyres, and it works in the opposite direction. If DRS is re-enabled, then look to switching to the dries very soon. What else can we look at though? Well, lap times are a great indication that you have reached to the crossover phase between tyres. For example, if it's getting wetter and your lap times have dropped about 2 to 3 seconds per lap, then it's probably best to switch over to the full wets. This is something you should look into during your practice time and make note of what is a good lap time in the dry, inter and wet conditions. This way you will know if lap times start to get significantly slower. Finally, you can also look at your tyre temperatures. This will mainly work for when the track is drying up. If tyres are starting to overheat, it means the track is drying up, suggesting that it is probably time to look at coming into the pits. All of these factors need to be taken into account when making a change to a different tyre compound, because if you change too early, it can really cost you, losing not only lap time but also damaging your tyres and giving the advantage to your rivals. Step 2. I can't stop. Right, so we now know when it's best to switch to wet weather tyres, but how do we actually drive in these conditions? First of all, let's tackle braking. We talked about braking without assist in our previous video, and the techniques applied there are the same as what you would do in the wet, with a small difference. The car will always have a lot less grip in the wet, which means you can't attack the corners like you did in the dry. Braking zones will become a lot longer, 50 to 75 meters longer in some cases. And you will always want to make sure you are braking in a straight line. Any rotation, no matter how small, will upset the car, causing a lockup, which in turn will make you aquaplane straight off the track. You also want to look into avoiding the curbs as much as possible. These are going to be extremely slippery and almost always resulting in you locking up. Finally, and this is probably the most important one, you have to be less aggressive. Unlike in dry conditions, you can't apply full 100% brake pressure. Doing so again would cause the wheels to lock up, which will slow you down. To counter this, apply less brake pressure straight away, so look to use at maximum 85 to 90%. Then use your usual braking technique of choice till the car is slowed down and you make the corner. Step 3. Slippery when wet. Wet weather driving is all about being patient, and accelerating out of a corner is no different. In our previous video about traction control, we talked about how being gentle on the throttle will help you get the best speed out of a corner. Well, in the wet, this is even more important, as grip levels are much lower, so the likelihood of spinning on exit is very high. It's all about adapting your driving style to the conditions around you, being patient on the throttle until you feel completely comfortable that you won't lose control of the car. Only until this is achieved will you be able to go full throttle. Be aware though, the car can jump out at you even in 6th gear, so short shifting when it rains is extremely important. And you should be doing this for every gear up to and including 6th gear. Step 4. Too much power. What if you are still spinning out, or you can't seem to handle the rear end of the car even after making these changes? Well, maybe you need to check your ERS and fuel settings. In the dry, hot lap mode and rich fuel mix gives you the best speed out of a corner, but this can actually hurt you in the wet. This is because you send more power to the rear wheels than the grip actually allows. This in turn causes more wheel spin, which if you control will lose you time, but if you don't, well, I'm sorry to say this, but you are heading for the barrier. Instead, look to be using medium ERS mode in all of the traction zones, and even lean mix fuel. This will put a lot less strain on the rear tyres. However, once the car is settled, use hot lap and rich mix everywhere else. Before a race as well, you can even underfuel the car, as you won't be using as much fuel in the wet weather. There is no need to add the weight before the race. This should not only make you lighter, but also quicker at the start compared to your rivals. Step 5, don't be too eager. When it comes to driving in the wet, being cautious is one of the most important things to remember. You should treat your car as that one mate you have to tread on eggshells around, because one wrong move and they go crazy. But being cautious doesn't just apply to your car, but also your surroundings. Your visibility is going to be greatly reduced, especially if you are following another car. This obviously means that you can hardly see where you are going, and it's even more difficult to see the car in front. With that in mind, you should take even more caution when heading into braking zones. Brake earlier than usual to make sure that you don't crash into the back of your opponent, as this will most likely result in a penalty, front wing damage, or both. Instead, take a few laps to assess where they are weakest, and once you are confident you can get the move done, then and only then should you go for it. Those have been our top 5 tips to help you drive in the wet. We understand that there are so many more tips and tricks to becoming a rain master, so if you would like to see part 2, then make sure you hit that like button. Feel free to check out our other Esports 101 videos as well for more help on F1 2019, and also subscribe to never miss an episode. But until the next one, I've been Haydon from Veloce, and we will see you again very soon.